So thank you all very much for coming to this another edition of online yoga in the midst of this of our being quarantined globally right now. So we got to do what we can to stay connected, even if that's just virtually. I don't like to call it social distancing because we're not socially distancing virtually right now. We may be physically, but not virtually. So anyway, I like to start off my sessions with a fun fact of the day. And I didn't look up anything, and as I usually do. I usually have something on my phone, but my phone is recording right now. I don't know if you could see it over my shoulder, but I have a book. Actually, I have two books next to my orange chair here by a French author named Georges Perec. And he wrote a book called La Disparition, which means the disappearance. And the entire book is actually written without the letter E, which is incredible. Full disclosure, I have not actually read the book yet. I just kind of bought it for for the gimmick of, wow, an entire book being written without the letter E. And then, amazingly enough, the translation, I don't know who the translator was, into English is called a void, not to avoid, but a space void, a void. And that is also written completely without the letter E. So that's pretty neat. All right, got a few other people joining in. So that's your fun fact of the day. Maybe you'll finish reading that book before I do. So a couple of things to keep in mind before we start. Listen to your body. If something feels a little bit sketchy, probably is, right? I'm not built like you. You're not built like me. So the suggestions I give you are just sort of loosely based on like a pose archetype. So keep that in mind. I usually do play music, but I won't, just so I can avoid, when I teach classes in person with all of your shining faces around me. But I won't now, just to avoid copyright issues. So feel free to put on your favorite music if you'd like to, and we'll take about the next 50 to 55 minutes or so here to try to de-stress from having been pent up inside for a lot of the time, the past 10 days or so, and looks like maybe it's going to be a little bit longer. So one hopes this is just an ephemeral quarantine, and that we'll be back out and about soon as things work. So something you will need, you might need a strap, or if you don't have a yoga strap, you can use a dog leash or a belt, something like that. And you might also need a broom or a mop, or in my case, I have a Swiffer here, so we can dust off the stagnation in our bodies. All right, so just have those things on at the ready, and let's get started. Now let's start in child pose, balasana, as it's called in Sanskrit, which is the language of yoga. For child pose, and I'm going on the assumption that we have very few props right now, and also going on the assumption that we get to use props that we don't get to use that often in a normal gym or yoga classroom setting. Right? So have your props within reach, and we'll go into child pose. Arms can be out in front of you. They can be crossed with your forehead on them, or even arms by your sides. I'm going to keep my arms in front of me, number one, because that's feeling better to me right now, but number two, so you can hear me better as I give instructions. Or suggestions. You don't have to do anything. You could stay in child's pose the remainder of this session. It doesn't matter to me. I'm giving you options of things to do to explore your body. So your change in position is an opportunity for awareness. What does it feel like to have this passive stretch of your back? Your back is in a position called spinal flexion for the most part right now. If your head is resting on your arms, you're technically creating just a little bit of extension, but for the most part, your spine is in flexion here. And that's a really nice opportunity to create some elongation of the soft tissues in the lower back, where we can all get quite congested from sitting in chairs a lot of the day, or sitting in our car seat a lot of the day. So your suggested theme, it was the same one in that I suggested in a class I did yesterday, is this: I'm becoming more aware. I'm becoming more aware. It's a theme I originally got from Jill Miller when I was doing a yoga tune-up training with her about 10 years ago, believe it or not. Time flies. So I'm becoming more aware. Awareness of your body, and maybe of your mind, never stops. And then, if it feels okay, begin to shift your body slightly side to side. So you start to get some movements in your back, in your hips, in your knees, and in your ankles, all to some degree. Your head might lift also, or you still have it resting either on your arms or on the floor. I've shifted my arms back a little bit so I could be on my forearms, and then also start to feel some of this external and internal rotation happening in the shoulders. Now try to allow, if you're on your forearms like this, it's almost like a lazy sphinx, right, who fell asleep on his job of watching the pyramids at Giza. And you just allow your head to lower, to hang passively. But you can also make it a little bit more active by trying to move your head maybe in a circular way, or as if you're tracing a sideways 8, an infinity pattern. Now you don't have to do this ad infinitum, but however much you feel like your neck needs in order to decompress a little bit. Good, and then shift forward, sort of out of that child pose position. So you're here on your forearms, and we'll do kind of the same thing, shifting side to side. But now that you have your hips more or less vertically over your knees with a little bit of wobbling, it's an opportunity to maybe feel a little more of gravity's effects on your hip socket, to push your leg bones into your sockets and feel the compression a bit more. So see if you can tune into that. Same goes for your humeruses, your upper arm bones, as they push into your shoulders. And then we'll take this into a position I call reach under the bed pose. You take your right hands, and usually I like to place it so that my, once I have placed it, my elbow is right over my wrist. So try to go for that, or not, that's what feels good in my body. You reach your left arm, then over to the right, in an attempt to get the outer edge of the left shoulder to the floor. Doesn't have to get there. You just do the best you can with it. And then you breathe. You breathe as deeply as you can.
So I would venture to say that when your spine is rotating, you're not quite as able to breathe to whatever your inherent max is, because you're creating some spirals that maybe are affecting how much contraction or stretch is happening in some of your breathing musculature. But it is an opportunity to maybe feel more of that stretch in your back by trying to invite in a little more oxygen and to escort out a little more carbon dioxide. Now, one further thing we could do is to try to push the outer edge of the left arm into the ground and to try to push your right hand to the right, isometrically. Your right hand is trying to push this way, out in front of you. And that way, another way to think about that, your left shoulder is trying to pull to the left. It actually attempts to create a contraction in that region between your shoulder blades while it's stretching. That might help it to relax more. And then come out of that. And then switch sides. So you don't have to swivel. I'm just swiveling so you can see what I'm doing. Got my left hand down, reaching under the other side of the bed, or the other bed if you got double beds. So left hand is down. Now I mentioned before that you can have your left elbow stacked over your left wrist. If for some reason it feels better to you to have your arm a little more outstretched, go for that. But I like to create that, I find I get the best isometric resistance with my left hand under my left elbow. And then just a reminder, to make this feel more active than it might appear, your left hand is trying to push to the left. Your right shoulder, if it's on the ground, if it's not, don't worry about this part, your right shoulder tries to pull to the right. And also, your right arm is trying to push through the floor. Finding that abdominal, thoracic breath, trying to breathe into your abdominal area, as well as your rib cage area. Another breath or two here. Good. All right. Then let's flip over and try just a little bit of abdominal work. So once you're on your back, we'll start off relatively simply by doing an abdominal crunch. Now this is nothing, where you have to bang out a whole bunch of reps for time. This is just very slow and controlled, letting your breath be the guiding force here. So your hands are just lightly behind your head, just giving your head a nice little hammock of support. You try to posteriorly tilt your pelvis, so the tailbone is kind of scooping forward and up. Another way you can kind of feel that in a little higher up in your lower back is to try to push your lower back into the floor. Hands are behind your head, as I've mentioned a few times already, just to give it support and to not strain the muscles on the front of the neck if you're prone to strain there. Inhale. On your exhalation, begin to peel the back of your body slightly off the ground, or a whole lot off the ground if you can. And then inhale as you re-lower your back bones. Exhale, crunching up. Inhale, coming down. Exhale, crunch up. Feel the shaking in your abdomen. Inhale, descend. Exhale up, maybe a little higher than last time. Inhale, descend. Exhale, come up. And inhale, lower. Good. Take your hands out from behind your head. Let your hands come down to the floor. Then just a quick little way to wipe away, quite literally here, the effects of that. Well, one of the effects hopefully is getting stronger. We don't want to wipe that one away, but just to let this be kind of a dynamic reset button for what you just did. So that was round one of a little bit of abdominal work. Round two here, a little version of a bicycle. You're probably accustomed to doing this very quickly in a fitness class and almost sort of rapid fire pace. But again, this is slow and controlled, letting your breath initiate each rotation here. So inhale while you're on your back. On your exhalation, you crunch up, pull your left knee toward your chest, aim your right elbow toward your left knee. They don't have to touch, they're just going in that direction. And then inhale as you descend. Exhale as you ascend, left elbow toward right knee. Inhale, lower. Exhale, lift. For that left side. Inhale, descend. Exhale, ascend. Inhale down. So start to make it harder if you want this time. As you exhale and come up, you straighten the left leg, aiming the right elbow toward the left knee. And then inhale, you bend. It's a little bit harder. It creates a little more contraction in the back of your body. Exhale, twist toward the right, and also you bring in hamstring stretch into it. Inhale, lower. Exhale, crunch up. Inhale, descend. Exhale, ascend. Inhale, lower. Exhale, lift. Last two here. That was one. Exhale, come up. Two. Good. Then, as long as you had that right leg up, as it's starting to rebend and make its way back toward the floor, cross your right leg over your left leg and let your knees drop over to the left. And then take them back up. Stay crossed the same way, but drop them over toward the right. And then back up, over toward the left. So the right leg stays crossed over the left leg as you're doing this. As you take it from side to side. It's a very slow moving, sort of pendulum like motion here. Just breathe normally. No intentional breathing pattern with this. Good. All right, let's switch sides now. We'll do the same thing. Cross left leg over right leg. You can actually kind of squeeze the legs into each other to activate the outer hip musculature, the abductors. You also have your internal hip rotators out there. Get them a little bit more active while you're kind of bringing them actually in a position to stretch. So knees drop over toward the right. And come back up. You go over to the left. Then back up. I didn't have quite the range of motion because my knee ran into my Swiffer there. Again, should be feeling this on the outer rim of your hips. One more time on each side. Good. All right. So next round of abdominal work, another crunch variation. So the the upper body will try to remain in a contracted position while the lower body starts to contribute to the abdominal work a bit more. So try to straighten out your left leg. Your hands are behind your head. You keep your right knee bent. Push your lower back into the floor. Right? Try to preserve your lumbar curve. And then try to get your upper back off the floor, maybe down to the bottom tips of your shoulder blades, if you can do that. Then, here comes the test here. You're trying to pile in your abdominal muscles as you start to move your right leg in a circle. And as your right leg is going out to the side and then forward, you gradually try to straighten it just for a couple of seconds maybe, or not even that long, before rebending it and pulling it back in. Right, so just do this very slowly. Notice what it does to the amount of shaking you might be getting as you do this. Right. If this doesn't feel very good, you can just make the circle smaller. You can just do something like this, keeping the right knee bent the whole time. Or you can skip this. You could just lie down on your back. That's fine. I can't tell if you're doing it anyway. So let's go the other way. Oops, caught myself slumping in my upper body a little bit. And if you're really feeling it, maybe a straight leg as you do this. And then go the other way again. Since we didn't do the straight leg part on the other side, we're going the first direction. Push lower back into the floor. And then release. Rebend that knee, and let's do a static twist now. So take your knee, cross your body, over to the left, right arm out to the side, and reassess your neck mobility. So turn your head as if you are saying no. No to having tension in your neck. Good. Bring your head back to the middle and bring your right knee back to the middle. Hug it in for a moment. Good. And release. So we'll do that on the second side. I'm going to swivel, just so you can see on the other side. You don't need to swivel though. So also for variety's sake, you can interdigitate your fingers the non-habitual way. Just so your brain can realize, oh yeah, there's more than one way of doing things. So going into, whoops, caterpillar crawling my way back as I stretch my leg out here. So now we'll try to do those sort of partial hip circumductions, which would be full if you weren't lying on the floor right now, and if you were standing, or even sideways. So we'll try this on the left side now. Start to straighten out your right leg, or even keep it a little bit bent if you need to. Posteriorly tilt, push lower back to the floor. Hands are behind your head. In your exhalation, crunch your upper body up, get as much off the ground as you can. Then, double down on your abdominal squeezing as you start to make circles with your left leg. Right? And you can see, depending on where I am in the movement, I straighten my leg before bending it again. You can even go, maybe even beyond the right leg. A little over adduction. Let's go the other way. Think happy thoughts.
you love this exercise, your abdominals love it. You and they just don't know it yet. Now, just to say we did things the same way on both sides, let's try this maybe with a straight leg now. Can you pull a few more vertebrae away from the ground? Let's go the other way. Good. All right. And then rebend that leg. Let's take it across the body to the right this time. Right hand can push down into your left knee, maybe even give yourself a little resistance there. Left arm is out to the side. Watch your body breathing here in this rotation. So I hope this is not too much information, but I have a rib or two that tends to pop out on my left side. I don't quite know why it happens, but I can feel it. Or for that reason, I can feel the stretch a little differently on the left side of my rib cage than on the right. I've found ways of managing that, and save from going to a chiropractor, but our bodies are pretty asymmetrical overall, I would say. And maybe see what it feels like to turn your head here. Right? By virtue of having your body from the shoulders down, or maybe kind of from the rib cage down, twisting this other way, that might have had some impact higher up your body in your neck to be able to turn your neck. And then we start to see our body's patterns and what positions we're in that start to show us where we might be a little stuck. And then come back into your back, hug that left knee in, breathe into it. Good. And then release. All right. So next, a little bit of abdominal work in a face down position, but on our hands. So this will be a plank exercise. I'm always working on refining the names of these things, but this is a one-armed plank while the other arm grabs the front of the mat. Pretty much as it sounds, but let me give you a few other cues as you get into it. First of all, we can just start off by building up to it. Plank on your knees, for instance. If you were to start out on all fours, which you are, with your hands under your shoulders and your knees under your hips, think about walking your hands forward about one extra hand length. Then at that point, you shift your body weight forward until your shoulders are about over your wrists. And I've made just a little adjustment, walking my knees back a little farther. Then at that point, be mindful of what your lower back is doing. Is it, for instance, going into an anterior tilt? You want to avoid that as much as you can. So you create a posterior tilt. Same idea as when you were on your back a moment ago doing that abdominal work, trying to push your lower back into the floor. You're trying to push your lower back into kind of a diagonal imaginary surface right now. So that's plank on your knees. Stick with that if you need to. Make sure you have a little bit of protraction in your shoulder blades, a little bit of spread between them. So you're activating your shoulder blade stabilizer, the serratus anterior. So stay with this, and make sure you don't lower your head, because you actually add a little bit more weight, a little bit more of a burden to your back muscles if you do that. When you take it out of alignment with the rest of your spine. You can stay there, or lift both knees a good, again, trying to maintain that pretty good form in your spine here. Then, if you want to do this plank variation that I mentioned, you take your mat with your left hand. This is assuming in this time of quarantine, but even after, if you're watching this sometime in post-quarantine land, you could still do this as a good way to try to strengthen your shoulder connection to your core. So I've grabbed my mat with my left hand, and in order to try to strengthen the muscles between the shoulder blades a little bit more, squeeze your glutes if you're up here with your knees off the ground too. I'm trying to pull my left hand, trying to pull the mat toward the left. And notice if you feel some degree of contraction between your shoulder blades. This is making me a little bit exhausted. I don't know about you, but I am trying to pull the mat this way. Whew. Then you can try to pull it the other way. Here's my right hand, right, grabbing a hold of it. You see that, hopefully. Trying to stay mostly face down, and you try to stabilize the rest of your body as you try to pull your mat sideways without letting it torque too much. Just try to stay as plank-like as you can. And then hand back down, knees down. I'm a little breathless from doing that. I don't know about you. And then go back into that first pose we started in to reassess how it feels here. Child pose. Maybe a sigh of relief. Perhaps you're in need of a little comic relief in this time of quarantine. And there's no practical merit here, maybe other than not minding looking a little ridiculous and working on pratyahara, I think it's called in yoga speak, sensory withdrawal. I call this the Ostrich Child pose for reasons that hopefully are evident now. You're in child pose, and you cover your head with your mat, so you somewhat blank out sound, and maybe somewhat blank out sight too. Right? Looks ridiculous, but it's like an ostrich with a head in the sand. We're yogis with our heads in the quarantine sand. One thing you can do, if you are doing that, is to hold the mat down very firmly with your hands and try to lift the back of your head into it. This is assuming, by the way, you have no existing neck issues. It's just a way to try to strengthen the back of the neck for all the head forward stuff we do when we're looking down at our computers and our mobile devices. Right? So I'm trying to pull my head up into my mat. And my forehead has actually come off the floor a little bit. All optional, of course. Back into regular child pose. Head is out of the sand now. Okay, good. So grab your Swiffer, as I have, or your mop, or your broom. Can't order room service, but we can order broom service right now. We'll be trying to dust off. It's a curse. Sorry, folks. Trying to dust off the dust on your squat. But your handle on your chosen device here will be something to make squatting a little bit easier, hopefully. So I'm going to stand back a little bit, just out of a little bit behind my mat, to ensure that I'm mostly in the shot here. So hold on to your handle here. If you're using your broom or your mop, maybe it's not so stable, just flip it over. The Swiffer, if you have one, pretty stable. So that's the side I'm going to use. So use your handle as if you're trying to drive it through the floor. Your feet are parallel. You try to screw the feet into the floor as if they were to spiral out sideways with both feet turning away from each other. But don't actually do that. This is an isometric effort to best use torque to build the pose from the ground up. Parallel feet, about hip width. I'm trying to drive my Swiffer or broom or mop into the floor as I squat as low as I can go. Yep, and then it's like you're Jack climbing the beanstalk. You come all the way back up. And then once you're at the top there, you can get a little bit of hip extension. Hello, here I am. By squeezing your glutes. And we'll try that again. So just make sure this is just slow and controlled here. Inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter. Choose your system, metric or imperial. Going as far down as you can go comfortably without letting your heels come up off the floor and without letting your feet go out of parallel position, if possible. It might be turned out a little bit. And then slowly take yourself back up. Squeeze your glutes. One more time with that. Slowly descend. So rather than as you go down into your squat, should have mentioned this the first time, but it just occurred to me here. Instead of sending your knees forward of your toes, think about trying to sit back as if I were a little more over here, about trying to sit on my sofa, like you're trying to sit in your chair. When I teach this in class, I usually say this is like a chair pose, but it's a dollhouse chair. It's a very tiny chair you're trying to sit on. And then try to hold on to this. Breathe deeply. We're holding it maybe about another 20 to 30 seconds. I'm very bad at math, by the way, so it might be longer. See what it feels like to breathe. This is just a perspective change, 90 degrees backwards from child pose, essentially. So it's very relaxing if you allow yourself to believe it. Good. All right, so that feels maybe about 30 seconds. Pull yourself back up. Now we'll continue to use your Swiffer or your broom or your mop. Again, if you got the broom and got the bristles down here, just flip it over so you have that end of it down here, because you don't want to be having a very unstable surface to hold on to here. So in a class I just taught yesterday, we did some lateral lunging, and we'll do that again here, but now with the help of the handle of your chosen utensil. I'm actually going to turn sideways so that you can see what I'm talking about here. So you take your feet wider than your mat, or if you're still on your mat, keep your feet on the mat for better traction. Feet are apart maybe like 3.5 or 4 feet, and you pull. You allow your body to hinge forward. You're trying to hinge at the hips, and holding on to the handle here should help you to maintain kind of a neutral spine. Nothing that's going to be very rounded. If you're, for instance, very tight in your hamstrings, and when you lean forward, your spine will be really rounded. So your feet are separated here. You're trying to drive your hands into the ground, and you could change positions with the hands periodically, and I'll lead you through that. I'm starting off with the right hand under my left hand. And again, you're trying to drive your broom or whatever you chose into the ground as you lunge side to side. Now try to keep your elbows relatively close to the midline here. So sort of in line with the handle that you're holding onto. And that will ensure your shoulders are not going to any position where they might feel impinged. You're not doing a ton of weight bearing right now, but anything we could do to maintain good shoulder stability, right? When you have flexion, the complementary position is extension. And so you get closer to that as you pull your elbows toward the midline. A lot more than you would need for a downward dog, for instance. You can also try, and you just keep lunging. Lunge is almost kind of secondary to the upper body stuff we're trying. You can try to reach that handle away from you to create a little more traction through your back. You might feel that all the way down into your lats. The latissimus dorsi, I call that the curtain muscle because it's like it attaches to your arms and then spreads across your mid and lower back. And your arms are like the curtain poles, holding up the curtain. Good. And now bring yourself back up for a moment. We're not done with that yet, but because we'll go into it with the left hand underneath. Yeah. So come down to the floor. So that was a lot of forward folding. So now we'll just try to counter it for a moment with unfolding, doing camel. Now you may not have access to yoga blocks, but you might have access to the back of a chair. Something that's of a height where you can feel like you're getting a good opening in the front of your body, but where you're still in the process of strengthening the back of your body. Right? So you squeeze your glutes, and as you've heard me say, this is probably my most broken record thing that I do say regularly, which is posteriorly tilt your pelvis and squeeze your glutes. Yeah, anytime you back bend. So here's option one. I actually have my feet backed up into my sofa here. You squeeze your glutes. You can kind of roll your shoulders back. They're a little bit retracted. And then try to get your hands onto your cushion. Yep, top of your sofa there. Right. You could squeeze your glutes and start to kind of bow open the front of your body. Now, if you feel like you could go back a little farther, you can walk away from your sofa or your chair. You're attempting, keyword attempting, and I have trouble with this myself sometimes. I'm not the best backbender out there in yoga land. There are plenty others on Instagram who can do this far better than I can, but we all, work with the bodies we have. So this is just sort of an archetype of what the position might look like. Again, others might do this far better than I can, but I'll attempt to lead you through it. So you try to squeeze your knees, and not actually bring them together, but use the mat, the traction between your knees and your mat. Try to squeeze your knees. You can think of that 90s infomercial device, the Thigh Master. So you're kind of thigh mastering your inner thighs. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, millennials, go on YouTube, look it up. Squeeze your glutes. Try to keep your hips over your knees. You can also just take your hands right up to the top of your buttocks. And then try to drive your hands straight down into them. Stick with that, or take your hands down to your heels and then start to find your back bend there. And this is just bridge pose that's been kicked forward 90 degrees. So think of it that way. Right? Now technically, this next suggestion does create a little kink in the posterior chain of support in your body. However, if it feels like stretching the front of the neck is something you'd like to do, form a little bit of a double chin as you go into this. Pull your chin back, and then perhaps let your head lean back, almost as if your shoulders are a harness for your head. So let's hold this for about 5 more breaths. I'm going to lift my head a little bit. Inhale. Exhale 5. Inhale. Exhale 4. Inhale. Exhale 3. Inhale. Exhale 2. Inhale. Exhale 1. Good. Bring yourself back up. Grab your Swiffer, your mop, or your broom again, and we'll go back into that lateral lunge. And this time, try to have, I believe, the left hand underneath this time. So maybe also even challenge yourself to take your feet a little bit wider, like 1 inch wider on each side than the last time. So that might feel different. And begin your lunging. As you lunge, I'm just turning sideways so you can see. You're trying to send your knee over your ankle, just like that. And then you try to send the other knee over its ankle, its respective side's ankle. Right? Let's see. Oops, I think I had my hands stacked wrong. Try to pull your elbows toward the midline. So that looks like this, by the way. Almost like I'm doing eagle pose. Right? They can kind of bypass each other. And I'll also suggest, this is something I don't get to do in a classroom setting, unless there were a bunch of brooms there. If your back is feeling strong enough, your abdominals are drawn in a little bit, you can be the lunging Swiffer or the lunging sweeper. Kind of ridiculous, I know. But not to your torso tissues as they try to stabilize you. And then let's hold the position, sort of make it almost like a wide-legged downward dog in a sense. You could try to walk your hands, maybe this time they're actually in the same place. I have them wrapped around, interlaced, interdigitated around my Swiffer pole here. And you try to reach that out in front of you as you lengthen your back. And again, think about trying to drive your hands and your utensil here straight down into the floor. Neutral spine, unrounded. Try twice as hard to push your mop or whatever it is into the ground. And then use that to help you stand back up. Good. And you are done with your yogic housework. So let's sit down. Ooh, I got a little sweat coming off the tip of my nose. So grab your yoga mat or yoga strap if you have one, or your dog leash or your belt, whatever you got on hand. Maybe just your hand, speaking of on hand, because you can get still some benefit out of this. We'll just do a basic back of the leg stretch here. Take your strap around your left leg. Once you're on your back here, and then you can straighten your right leg if it feels okay to do that. So you might choose to have one end of the strap in each hand, or to have two ends of the strap in one hand. Just kind of decide, it's up to you what you would like to get out of it. So I'm going to take both ends of the strap into my left hand and use my right hand to push into my left thigh to kind of encourage my knee extension, right? The knee end of your hamstrings will start to stretch out a little bit more, and you might feel this in the back of that left thigh. So you push into the thigh as you try to pull the leg towards you, and then you can, almost like a bonus here, get a little biceps curl in a static but active position. My elbow's bent, I'm trying to pull it kind of to approach my belly button. I'm shaking. I don't know if you all can see that on the screen. Shaking a whole lot. Then take both ends of the strap into your right hand, cross it over your body, over to your left. We already did a twist earlier, but not with a straight leg, or almost straight leg. You just do what you can. Leg goes out to the right. Left arm's out to the side. Maybe turn your head to the left. Good.
even here, you might be getting some of that shaking. You can move your top hip, your left hip, away from your head. Right? That's called hip depression. And then release, and we'll switch. So your strap goes around your right foot now. Straighten out your left leg if you'd like to. Right? It'll just help to reinforce the fact that you're essentially in the beginning stages of doing a split on your back. That's pretty much what this is. So you decide, one end of the strap in each hand, two ends in one hand, and it doesn't have to be necessarily the opposite hand that holds on or that pushes into the thigh. If you chose that option on the first side, you could do it with the right hand, which would also be an opportunity to kind of over adduct the leg and kind of bring it into this tensor fascia lata area, this muscle that funnels into the iliotibial tract. But, not doing that right now. So just keep your leg doing what it was doing on the first side, so you really have a good opportunity to see which side is more supple. The same test of strength and flexibility and resting hamstring length, or in this case not resting, very active. Squeeze your right thigh to help that knee get a little bit straighter. And then cross your leg over to the left, stacking your hips. I'm actually pulling down with a fair amount of effort here on my right foot, as if I'm trying to almost just tape it to the floor, as if it were just going to go boing, spring into the air. So do that as you push your foot up into the strap. You might feel this on the outside of your right hip a little more. Move your right hip away from you. Maybe turn your head to the right also. Another way to think about moving the right hip forward, pull your bottom hip, your left hip, towards your head. And then release. So now as we go into our relaxation position, you just stretched the outer edge of the hip. Now we can get to the inner thigh a bit more, go back into, or actually for the first time this session, reclining bound angle pose. This is the angle and it's bound just by your feet touching. Knees are dropped open. If you want to grab a couple of pillows from your sofa or your chair, you can put those on your knees. If you prefer just to straighten out the legs here, then do that. And then I invite you to rest your hands atop your belly as a tactile reminder to breathe predominantly into your abdominal area. So your lungs, of course, are not in your stomach area. That's the impression of that is created by the respiratory diaphragm's myofascial attachments to the lungs, pulling them downwards toward the abdominal contents and then distending that visceral region as if to suggest it's filling with air from your lungs. And then it recoils back up towards your rib cage. So how much can you allow your hands to go on a very slow moving amusement park ride of inflating and deflating. As you're lying here, if your feet are still together and your knees are open, to change up where you're feeling anything in your body, but to change up most likely where you're feeling the stretch in your inner thighs, you can slide your feet forward a bit. Or backwards, a little closer to the pelvis. And then very slowly start to completely stretch out your legs. Let your arms just flop to the floor, and then imagine doing kind of a slow moving snow angel on your back. And slide your arms out to the sides and then toward the wall behind you. If any of you are peeking with your eyes open, you can see that my hands have vanished under my sofa. But I'm trying to stretch my hands straight back and my feet straight ahead, usually calling this the first thing in the morning stretch. And in real time right now, this is going into that crepuscular transition from day to night. But should this be rebroadcast at some point, maybe you are practicing this in the morning and it is the first thing in the morning stretch. And then take your arms back down and your legs roll to one side. Maybe keep your eyes closed. Last few moments here. Bring yourself up into a seated position, and if you feel compelled to, you can take your palms together and bow toward them, feeling tremendous gratitude to your body for its support this past hour and every hour up to this point and in the future. And perhaps bowing also in tremendous gratitude to all of your blessings, past, present, and future. Well done. Thank you. Namaste. Thank you.